So, hello everyone. This is the president of Pro AI Global, Ammara Aftab, with you in Dubai right now, and we have a very amazing, expert, and active guest today with us, Mr. Len. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So today we would love to explore about him, his work, and everything. So let's deep dive into the life of Mr. Lin and how you started everything and what are you doing now. Although I know that, but the audience also know that.
See, that's a very complicated question because where did it begin? It's hard to say. I feel like I've been a hacker my whole life. I was a hacker before there was a term for hacking. I'm 50 years old. I'm currently employed at CyberArk as a technical evangelist. I've been here for 11 years.
You are still young, by the way.
Oh, if you're only as old,
50 years old is, yeah.
Well, if you're only as old as you feel, I'm 750.
Okay.
But no, I've been, if they say that the hacker's crime is curiosity, then I've been a criminal since I can remember. I remember just taking apart different electronic devices, mechanical devices as a child, just because I was always curious to the point of how, not just how things work, but what made them work. Mm-hmm. So I am a product of a blue collar home. My father was an auto worker and my mother was a house cleaner, and which actually left myself and my younger siblings basically to our own devices most of the time. And I was the type of individual that, if left alone, could get into various shades of mischief. And it wasn't that I was trying to be a bad child, it was just that I couldn't resist the curiosity of different machines and mechanisms. So I would take things apart, try and figure out how they work and put them back together, and hopefully they worked. Some of the times they did, some of the times they didn't. It was a very interesting childhood. I had a very hard time making a lot of friends, which unfortunately, in the States, if you're not good at sports and things, the catch-all social class would be the quote-unquote burnouts or the long-haired rejects. So I was the only ruffian still making the honor roll, which really kind of confused most. Mm-hmm. Because my intelligence and the things that I found interesting were extremely contradictory to themselves. So that led me down many paths that ultimately wound up within the motorcycle gangs. Mm-hmm. I spent the better part of 15 years as a outlaw 1% motorcycle gang member. I was a black hat and an active criminal. I spent most of my life in that role, and it wasn't until I was handed my granddaughter, and unfortunately, or actually I think fortunately would be the better way of putting it, after looking at this child, I was unable to ignore the choices in my life and how I had misprioritized the things that were truly valuable. So after the birth of my grandchild, I basically decided that the only option for me was that I needed to make some serious changes in my life. And up until that point, the only things I was really ever good at was fighting and computer work, specifically breaking into. So it was at that point that I made the decision that the only option that I really had for any type of career would be to take the criminal history and basically use that knowledge to help people find protections against people like I used to be. In the United States, we have an expression that it takes a thief to catch a thief. And we hear within the cybersecurity community all the time that, we need to think like the bad guy. We need to be able to think like an attacker. And when it comes to me, I don't have to think like an attacker. I just need to think.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very impressed by, I recently had your session, right? So I'm very impressed by all the things you were explaining there about the chips, especially RFID chips, because this is, to be honest, it's new. Previously, there was a chip which everyone can see, but the chips, which is inside the body.
Mhm.
Like how that idea comes into your mind and what exactly you are doing with those chips right now.
See, again, I have to give you credit because you have an amazing way of phrasing questions that draw a lot of information out. That, again, is a two-part question, at least for as far as my answer. The first time I was made aware of consumer-grade implantable electronics was back around 2014, 2015. There was a group called Grindhouse Wetware. They no longer are in existence, but they came out with the first consumer electronics that could buy with the intended purpose of being in vivo. And what it was called the North Star. And it was a puck that's about the same size as this implant that I have right here.
Oh God.
And the difference is the main purpose behind it was to draw attention to the receiver. So it had 3 or 4, possibly 5 very bright LEDs, and it's great if you wanted to go to a rave. You didn't even need to worry about glow sticks. All you had to do was just throw your hands up and you were lit up. At that time in my life, I was still a black hat, so the idea of drawing attention to myself was extremely counterintuitive to being a hacker.
Mhm.
So I remember at the time thinking, this is really, really cool, but it's not for me. There was no input-output capability. It was, in my opinion, and I have since changed my opinion on this, but at the time, I was like, this is a symbol of vanity. It's a way to go, look at me. I didn't realize at the time, but those were actually the pioneers that were laying the groundwork for the road that I would walk, 5 years later.
Mhm. And does it hurt?
That is kind of an objective question. Did it hurt when they were put in? Absolutely. One of the things that people don't realize when it comes to subdermal microchips, these are looked at by most regulatory agencies as body jewelry, so the same as an earring or a body bell for a body piercing. Even though that they need to be regulated due to communication frequencies, they're not looked at as a threat, they're looked at as a commodity. So from that aspect, it becomes very difficult to regulate. How I came about this, it was complete happenstance. I travel a lot for work, and part of my job is to go out and try and introduce cybersecurity concepts at different conferences. And I happen to be in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And just as some people collect shot glasses or the collector's spoons or the magnets from different places, I know this may sound kind of funny, but I collect stickers.
How many chips do you have?
Currently, I have 11 microchips. I just had a new one put in 2 weeks ago. We actually had it put in to go along with the documentary film that we just finished filming. I am the subject of a documentary that will be coming out around July or August, tentatively titled I Am Machine. It's being done by an independent filmmaker. We do have a screening planned for DEF CON, and we will be submitting to all of the film festivals like Sundance and so forth over the course of the next couple of months, and hopefully we'll be able to get you guys a screening of it before the end of the year.
Awesome. When you were showing me this, so the movies came into my mind that like in my childhood that we have seen that someone have like eaten the chocolate or a toffee and that guy is invisible. So can we have this in our future? Something like that?
I don't think we can have something that would break the laws of physics, but I look at this more as an intermediary step for humanity. And I know that may sound very conceited, but if we take a look at what's going on in the cyber world today, we're dealing with the big monster on the hill right now is artificial intelligence and large language models. And one of the things that we keep seeing is when is the artificial intelligence going to become superior to the intelligence of humankind? And if I take that and then use the Matrix as an analogy, we have in some ways moved into a parallel kind of a situation. We're no longer dealing where we as humans are interfacing to the computer using programming languages. We're not coding anymore. We're using language, just like there was within the Matrix. That's why they only saw the code, because it was an abstraction layer. So as we move forward, we're getting farther and farther away from the concept of a person in a chair and a keyboard inputting data and getting a response. So one of the ways that I look at the concepts of microchipping and augmented humans is someone like me going to be the stopgap between the standard human and the artificial intelligence being able to communicate with the machines utilizing the same languages and protocols? Is that how the human being is going to stay relevant in this new future? The other question I ask is that things like microchips. I mean, I have one that, if you'd like, I'd love to demonstrate.
Yeah, please.
You know, a lot of the time people look at me and the first thing they...
In the camera, that would be great.
You know, the first thing that they think about is all of the different ways that I can potentially compromise. But we don't look at the fact that microchips also have the potential to be a validator for an individual human. So we've all heard about what happened in Hong Kong with the deepfake transfer of millions of dollars. There is no SSL or private key for an individual human being. Is something like a microchip going to potentially be that protocol? So, like I was saying, you know, microchips could also be used for security. I have 2 microchips that I use that actually enhance my security online. One of them is called the VivoKey Apex, and this is an actual complete architecture. And this is actually how I get OTP codes. This also is my crypto wallet key. This does PGP, SHA-256 HMAC. So this also, even though it does have the potential to be used as a weapon, also has the ability to give me in vivo human multi-factor authentication.
Amazing.
You know, and if we extrapolate out, could something like this be used as a private key to enhance the security of my identity? Possibly. You know, the other option that I've thrown out is the potential that we will at some point give up the control of our identities to a third party, and we make it something like identity validation as a service. But as of right now, there is a hole within the infrastructure to address these types of threats.
Do you think that such kind of chips, maybe in future, everyone will get that in their hands and they don't need to carry the digital, even the phones or like the digital passport or cards?
I do. And, you know, I believe it's Sweden actually at one point in the recent past actually gave up to their citizens the option to actually have their, what we would call our social security number within the United States, or their global identifier for the country, as an implant. And quite a few of the citizens actually took them up on that offer. We've seen in some countries where they've allowed implants to act as their payment option to get on the metros. So I do think that the idea of augmentation is going to move forward. I have a credit card chip in the top of my hand that I can actually tap to pay.
Wow.
You know, and beyond that, through the use of implanted technology, even something as basic as a magnet. You know, I have a biosensing magnet in the tip of my pinky. And everybody will say, yeah, this makes for a really amazingly fun bar trick. But what it doesn't show or tell is the fact that I have a new sense that was added to my body that I wasn't born with. I can literally feel electromagnetic fields and currents.
Oh my God. That's blown my mind, actually.
It's an amazing feeling. And, you know, people ask me, well, what's the use case? Depending on how well you have shielded your electrical wiring in your home, I can trace your electrical wires. And when we look at most large manufacturing facilities, they don't do a lot as far as shielding, and they use magnetic locks on their doors. Most magnetic locks have what is called drop-down fail-safe in the case of an emergency, which will unlock the doors to allow emergency responders into a building. If I can find the wire, drill a small hole, I can pull your electrical cable through, bypass that, drop the lock into fail-safe mode, and walk right into your business. I actually detail an example of that in the book.
Oh yeah. So we have an amazing book, Human Hacked, by Len Noe.
It's just no.
It's no.
Correct. Opposite of yes.
Len Noe. Okay. And this is an amazing book. and I would love to read this and explore more about it. So tell me one more thing, that is any kind of biological issues you face, or
No,
what about the medical treatments if you go for any kind of medical treatment?
I cannot go anywhere near an MRI due to the amount of metal I have. It is minimal. The question that I usually get before that is, how does this affect my ability to travel? And the answer is very simply is it doesn't. When you think about microchips and the green circuit boards with all the little traces, most of that is actually silicon. It's not metallic, so it's not magnetic reactive. So I have currently presented and been able to travel to 69 different countries. And I've been doing this for 8 years and 5 years now, completely implanted, and I've never had any issues with travel. And the reason behind that, I honestly believe, and one of the main reasons why I went internal as opposed to using some type of an external tool, most people don't realize that the minute you put something inside your body, according to the United States, we have HIPAA, and according to the European Union, they have GDPR. This is now considered medical health data, and therefore it is private and not able to be even
And you said that the piercing like this. Cool. And what about the Neuralink? Do you think?
I think I have mixed feelings about Neuralink. I will freely say that I think the fact that Elon Musk has brought brain-computer interfaces to the front of the public's attention is a wonderful thing. I think his approach is wrong. I think one of the reasons that Neuralink gets as much attention as it does is due to its CEO, but there are some issues, in my personal opinion, with the approach. Neuralink is following the same basic process that was done by BrainGate and every other BCI or BCM, which is the predecessor of the term brain-computer interface, was BCM, which was brain-computer machine, which all involve open skull brain surgery. There is another company called Synchron, and I do not get any kickbacks from these people. I'm not affiliated. I just think that their approach is something that we should be looking at. Rather than requiring open skull surgery, they're actually using a catheter methodology like you would with a heart catheter or a stent. So they're going in through an artery up into a capillary in the brain and then expanding on the inside of the capillary. So it's a much lower risk for the patient, lower entry point as far as the doctor, because you don't need to be a neurosurgeon. And the procedure is something that most doctors are relatively familiar with. Additionally, Neuralink is now working on patient 2. They've learned quite a bit through the trials of patient 1. Neuralink has done over 10. Additionally, Synchron is recently, from my understanding, being looked at by Bill Gates as well as Jeff Bezos. So I think that there is going to be some competition within the brain-computer interface market very soon.
And I have research about, there is a company, Cognify, and they already created some kind of device so they can re-implant the memory.
Absolutely. There's actually trials out there and projects working where they're trying to take EEG scans and recreate photographs from the EEGs to help people with Parkinson's. So I think that the future holds great promise, especially for medical debilitations. But at that same time, the one thing that I have learned as a result of selectively modifying myself, and I think that this especially applies to medical grade implantations, is anytime you integrate technology into the human body, you are assuming any vulnerabilities of that technology. And the worst thing someone could do to me is brick one of my chips, basically make it to where I can't rewrite it. But these same type of vulnerabilities are also there within continuous glucose pumps, pacemakers, pain resistance, stem pain management systems. And the difference is, I just have to replace a brick chip. These people could suffer up to death. This is where ransomware could actually become ransom. So I would like to see more emphasis around medical grade protections for implantations, as well as seeing how far we can actually move the human in terms of its capabilities and what its functionalities are possible.
That's totally understandable. Okay, so at the last, I just want you to conclude the overall discussion and what kind of suggestions you would like to give the audience, how they should move on, and what should they do to be a part of it, to aware about it, and how they can move on with this technology.
Well, that again is a multi-part question.
Mhm.
So the first thing I would say is be aware that we are here. It is very difficult to stop any type of an attack vector if you don't know that that attack vector exists. Secondarily, is the potential to be up to 150,000 individuals with the same type of capabilities that I have. The one point I will say is just because you are an implanted human does not, in my opinion, automatically make you a cyber threat. It's not the tool, it's what you do with it. I am a very small part of those 150,000 potential implantees. I use them as offensive tools. Most people will get one of these and they'll use it as a replacement to be able to get into their gym or get into their office. Possibly they just want to put their car key onto an implant so they don't have to worry about losing their keys and they'll always be able to drive. So implantation does not automatically mean threat. But if you're unaware of this attack vector, your digital forensics and incident response team could very well go insane trying to understand how something happened if they were unaware. The best advice I can give to people moving forward, and this goes beyond just the concept of implantation, but technology in general. The one thing that I think people need to start looking at is personal responsibility. We are the ones holding these pieces of tech. And I hear more often than not excuses when it comes to people who have either been breached, compromised, clicked on a phishing email, and it's always, well, the protection suite didn't work, or maybe I forgot to update the antivirus. The truth is, most of these types of actions are caused by a direct action of ours. So I have been doing this kind of work for going on 32 years. And in that time, everybody wants technology to be easier to use and simple. But I will freely say I have rarely ever seen anything in tech, especially cyber, that makes life easier that has ever made it safer.
Great. So it's really I really had an amazing conversation with you, and maybe if we sit together, so it will go on like maybe 2 or 4 days. So let's wind it up. So thank you so much for your precious time as well as your all the productive conversations. Thank you.
It was my absolute pleasure. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Amazing. Thank you.